This isn't a segment where we praise the Labour Party. I've not received a blow to the head recently, don't worry. I'm in reasonably well mental health. And the point of this is more going to be that the Conservatives are obsessing over things like diversity. And Nigel Farage has been going around telling everyone that he's not racist and he loves Islam.
Doesn't care what religion you are or what skin colour you are, or anything about you. Doesn't care about anything.
He's completely indifferent. He doesn't care about you, is what Nigel wants to really get across. But the Labour Party has quietly been in Parliament, the one party in Parliament really, quietly pushing some right-wing things. And partly to shame the supposedly real right-wing parties, but also for the sake of a bit of humour, we're going to pretend that the Labour Party is actually good today and they're doing good things.
Well, it's funny, isn't it, that the more radical ends of the bell curve in whatever given movement you're in will sort of always be disappointed with any moderates.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's quite often, even thinking about it just now, even quite often assassinations are quite often done by people, more radical people on your side of the aisle, right?
I've never really thought about it like that, but I suppose so.
Quite often, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like arch nationalists killed Gandhi, for example, or arch Zionist killed the Jewish prime minister back in the 90s. It is often the way. So yeah, you can imagine hardcore lefties accusing. Well, I can't imagine. I know they do. Hardcore lefties accusing Starmer of being right wing.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's not actually right-wing.
No, of course he's not.
But what they've been trying to do is, because there's an upcoming local election, and they're a little bit worried that it's going to be a forecast for the next election, which is all the way in 2029, is that they're trying to posture themselves as sort of... I suppose they're trying to lay claim to some of the right-wing ground in British politics, and they're trying to target the Tories and reform at their own game. And it's interesting to see it play out because, in many ways, Labour have been more effective at doing this sort of thing than the Conservatives have when they were in government. And that's not me being hyperbolic or silly. There's genuinely some things here that the Labour Party have done more easily than the Conservatives. And I think that that's by design because the civil service and the entire apparatus of government is sort of set up to be activated when Labour gets in, right? Because of the constitutional reforms of New Labour and everything has sort of been set up to work when they're in power, and when other people are not in power, less so. And I think that's also to do with the personnel as well.
Oh yeah, just the actual human members of the judiciary and the civil service are sympathetic to leftism.
Of course, because there's a selection pressure to be sympathetic towards expanding the state if you work for the state as well. People who believe in big government tend to work for the government. Just what it is. But I've seen lots of this recently. Keir Starmer leads most right-wing government in a generation, says ex-Labour MP, and I think that's actually kind of true. It probably is. Certainly more right-wing than the previous Conservative government. And there was this from about 3 months ago, the end of last year. Keir Starmer amongst least left-wing Labour MPs, study finds, which is more of a condemnation of the other Labour MPs than Keir Starmer.
That is from The Guardian. I mean, that's exactly what I was saying earlier.
It is.
Like full-blown Corbynistas, tankies, like actual commies, like kind of hate Starmer for not being hardline enough.
Let's remember that he carried out a massive purge of the Labour Party's left wing, didn't he?
Do that, yeah.
All of the Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitism stuff, I mean, I don't actually believe he's anti-Semitic, to be honest.
He's just an Islamophile.
Yeah, and I think that all of that sort of thing was just to get rid of them, really, wasn't it? It was the whole Labour anti-Semitism scandal was just a way of carrying out a socially acceptable purge. But
he did remove the whip from a number of... It wasn't that many, though, was it? Wasn't it only like 4 or 5 or 10 MPs? He removed the whip just straight away on day one.
There were a handful, weren't there?
Yeah.
It was for various reasons. It wasn't for one specific one, but they're basically just people that might cause him problems. So let's actually look at what they've done rather than what people are saying about them. Well, you may remember back in January of this year, the Home Office was claims that the police are two-tier or justice was two-tier is an extreme right-wing narrative. Now, this would be interesting, particularly so if they adopted that narrative. And we actually covered this, didn't we? The reversal of the Sentencing Council's new guidelines, which had special rules for ethnic minorities and women. So it basically explicitly discriminated against white men when it comes to the justice system. And the Justice Secretary of the Labour government said, this is a direct quote, "It amounts to differential treatment and the government will fight it and remove all of those specific aspects of it." And it's basically an admission of two-tier justice, isn't it? Because she's saying that there's different treatment depending on who you are, which is the entire crux of that two-tier narrative, as they called it. And they're basically pushing back against this, which is interesting. I wouldn't say that they're true believers. I'm saying that they're doing it for cynical electoral reasons. So don't necessarily buy into it, but it is interesting.
It's it's something a bit deeper there as well. That notice that the government, with a big majority, the government have got to fight their own.
The Sentencing Council is independent of the government.
Yeah, they've got. There's any sort of fight there that the government just can't just immediately do as they please. Mm-hmm. It's just odd. I mean,
we've got lots of independent institutions that are basically just a check on the power of a government that might get delusions of grandeur from the perspective of the globalist faction.
Those things, the whole rotten edifice needs to be torn down. The government should be able, for better or worse, shouldn't have to answer to or have to go to battle with a body like that. Mm-hmm. It should be with the cabinet. It's like in America where the state will create an investigating body in order to investigate itself.
It happens all the time. Like the whole purpose of setting up an independent inquiry is that it puts an issue to bed without having to deal with it. They talk about that in what's it called, Yesminster, don't they? Or The Thick of It. Both of them acknowledge that same thing. But anyway, you need not worry, Bo, because Keir Starmer has declared an end of globalization and globalism recently, which I thought was interesting. And I'm going to read a little bit from this because
He must mean only in an economic sense.
Yeah, I think so. So Keir Starmer will declare the end of globalization and admit it has failed the public amid the growing fallout of Donald Trump imposing global trade tariffs, including 10% on the UK. The Prime Minister will argue in a speech on Monday that the shock from the US President's trade war means Britain must move further and faster, cutting red tape to boost economic growth. Cut red tape? That sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's the kind of thing that I would say. So we've got to make it easier to do business in our country. It's interesting, isn't it?
The sentiment is, not leftist, even libertarian.
It is, yeah.
But I doubt whether he sort of really means a word of it, or they'll replace the red tape with other red tape. And it's just economically, right? It's not like the end of globalism as in the free movement of peoples.
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily saying that. He just means in the trade sense. And apparently, in an article on Sunday, he said, "The world as we knew it has gone. We must rise to meet the moment." There you go. So another thing he's done is he kept the Conservatives' two-child benefit cap. So previously, before the Conservatives introduced this, you could have 3, 4, 5, 6, who knows how many children, and you would receive money proportionate to the number of kids you had, and then they capped it at two children, so basically like replacement birth rate. Any above that, and you're paying for them yourself, which I don't believe in that sort of welfare anyway. Obviously, the government's ruined the economy anyway, so people have to rely on handouts, but in an ideal world, the government wouldn't be involved in this, and people's stolen tax money wouldn't be given to other people to have kids they can't afford. And I can't afford to raise 3 children currently, so I shouldn't have to pay tax so someone else can. I think that's an innate sense of fairness. Of course, traditionally the left is very much in favour of let's just throw as much money to single mothers as humanly possible. That's not going to end in tragedy whatsoever, is it? But yes, this is a more sort of bread and butter right-wing issue that they've stuck with, and they've received a fair amount of criticism for this. Apparently, a charity has said that Labour has already sent 30,000 children into poverty. It's worth mentioning that if you're in poverty in this day and age, then you've probably done something wrong. And in fact, the definition of poverty is normally calculated based on the median. So there will always be a certain percentage of people in poverty. Normally a charity sets it about the bottom 20% as based on the median income are in poverty. And so you could have an infinite number of resources, and as long as there are a bottom 20%, they'll be in poverty according to that definition. So it's basically a way of a charity forever having a reason to exist, because they can say, oh, these people are in poverty. They're thinking like, don't have running water or food. But actually, being in poverty in modern Britain means you can have a car, a house, flat screen TV. You might not necessarily be living a lavish lifestyle, but at the same time, you're not like destitute, rattling pennies around in a tin can outside of shops on your high street. You're not, a beggar, as people might imagine.
Or just dying of starvation in the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's not really what it means anymore. Right. So yes, I just found that interesting, and I was quite surprised at this one when it happened. Sick and disabled face being stripped of $1,200 a year each in welfare benefits as Reeves tries to balance the budget. So this was interesting to me because I didn't expect the Labour Party to go after the sick and disabled, but here we are. Even I have a bit of sympathy towards those people because they haven't brought it upon themselves, obviously. And so actually, I think there is a valid claim that they deserve some help, but the Labour Party doesn't think so. They think that they deserve less money a year.
Well, it's just the obvious thing to say here, isn't it? Is just making the distinction between people that are genuinely disabled and those that aren't, because I just think that, well, we know really that there are lots of people gaming the system one way or another.
That was because the government created incentives to lie about it, really, isn't it?
And the way, and pardon me, and the definitions of what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with someone that maybe did injure their foot or their leg or something at work, and then they got better, but they just claim they haven't. They claim they're still in pain. Well, claiming they're still in pain for 30 years, and actually there's nothing wrong with them. And then they're in the same category as someone who's genuinely born with really, really bad disability and will never be able to get better, and it's entirely not their fault, and all that sort of thing. So I don't think no one really begrudges those people.
No, of course not.
Some sort of state welfare. I mean, there's some hardline people out there, hard right people, that said there should be no state benefits.
Well, I agree with that, but I think that charity would actually probably benefit them more. If people knew that the money was actually going to genuinely disabled people, I think people would be more charitable than if they were paying it via their contributions with tax. Because also they get a very small slice of the pie in terms of taxation. And I think people would be more willing to be generous if they actually voluntarily did it.
Either way, in modern Britain, it seems the case that there are lots and lots of people taking the mickey out of the system.
Perfect example is there was the Motability scheme that was meant to help people with disabilities get a car, and one of the qualifying things was that you're autistic. So you could get a nice new Mercedes if you're autistic, and also you could easily fake that if you wanted to. I would get an autism diagnosis for a Mercedes. I'm not autistic, but I know how to fake it.
The worst thing as well...
I'm joking, by the way.
The worst thing about all of that is that it actually screws over the genuinely disabled.
Of course.
In all sorts of ways.
Well, that's the worst thing about it. It's a very immoral thing. Not only are you taking advantage of people's basically generosity, but you're depriving people who need it more than you. So it's a very immoral thing to do.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And Keir Starmer wrote an article in the Mail angry about illegal migration. He's
pretending to be angry.
Yeah. Of course, I'm not taking him at his word. Just for the one person in the comments that's just like, why are you supporting Labour? Why are you falling for it? We're not, okay. It's just a bit of fun. But yeah, he's gone through this arc. Eventually he'll be writing for the Spectator as well, maybe the Telegraph, talking about scroungers or I don't know what, any sort of thing. But yeah, he wrote a long article talking about what he's going to do to tackle illegal migration, how he thinks it's unfair and blah, 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 blah. But the fact he's having to say this just suggests that he's reading the room, and he knows that people are actually genuinely annoyed about this, and something has to be done about it, no matter your politics. Which I think he's more pragmatic than people give him credit for.
Something needs to be said about it. Because, of course, you could just use the Navy to...
Yeah, of course.
For the small boats. Small boats things. You could do it.
Yeah, you could also just deport them all without processing their claims. It's pretty easy. But anyway, there's lots of solutions. We talked about it ad nauseum. But one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that per capita, Starmer is deporting more people than Donald Trump. So these are the official figures. So we're just going off of those, the people that both the US and the UK is aware of. Britain has approaching 250,000. The US has 11 million. So obviously there's a difference in scale. But Starmer has deported 24,000 in 8 months, which is about 3,000 per month, or 14 per 1,000 a month. Trump has deported 37,000 in 3 months, so obviously much more in a shorter time, but also there's much more to begin with, which is 12,333, that's probably recurring, or 1.1 per 1,000 a month. So
I would question it's 215,000. I mean, that might be...
That's the official figure, yeah. Obviously, the US also has unregistered illegals as well. That's not the point, though, is it?
I suppose, all right, fair enough. All right, fair enough. I'll take it on face value.
But it's interesting now that all of a sudden there's a left-winger in charge and they're actually able to do this sort of thing, and no one's saying, oh, the human rights, oh, those poor people. People just sort of accept that it's going on. And it's 14 times the rate of Trump. Of course, I'm being a bit silly. Obviously, the problems are slightly different to one another. And also with America, you've got sort of like the MS-13 cartels and all sorts of other complications. Also, the Labour Party has kept the ban on puberty blockers for under 18s, despite lots and lots of campaigning and lots of people angry about this sort of thing. And they've just ignored it all and kept away the worst excesses from children. So yeah, no children will be given this sort of stuff.
Credit to them for this one. I think all the other examples you've said, one way or another, have got caveats, or it's actually bullshit, or it's a spin from their political enemies on the left of them, or whatever. All the other things so far, I've been like, oh, yeah. It's not really, though, is it? They're not actually right-wing things in any real sense, even conservative things, let alone right-wing things. Not that this is, but still, credit here. Credit to them here. You know, I'm loath to give Labour and Starmer any credit whatsoever, but fair enough, that is good. And I wouldn't have expected them to do it. You know, if you'd asked me the day before the last general election, will Labour do this? I would say, no way. No way.
Yeah, same here. I never saw this coming, but here we are.
So, once again, loath to do it, but credit where it's due. That's a good thing, isn't it? Undeniably.
Another thing that surprised me was this, that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, set up an Elon Musk-style dodge unit to root out inefficiency within the Home Office. I didn't realise she would be modelling herself off of Elon Musk, but here we are. They've already started banning away days, which cost more, and I think they banned an expensive venue. So it says, expensive away days that involve hiring external venues are also likely to be banned, insiders said. The move comes after the department hired an opulent central London ballroom to hold an event for civil servants last month, and apparently there are facilities that they can do that without having to pay for it. And apparently now they're scrutinising and overseeing every penny, whether you can believe that or not. I don't believe Labour will ever be fiscally responsible, because the entire raison d'etre for their political party is to spend more money, basically. They're the spend more money party, which I don't agree with, obviously.
That's so quintessentially British. The American version is saving hundreds of millions straight away and reworking flows of capital throughout the world. Our one is, let's not have a party in a ballroom. Let's have it in a slightly less grand venue than a ballroom. Like, it's just I just thought that was funny that our version of everything is always on such a smaller, usually more lamer scale. But no, it's good. I mean, if they're doing that, even if
it's for appearances, it's still
Yeah.
better than nothing,
Right.
isn't it?
Right, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I thought this was interesting from early last month. Civil servants told to deliver or leave as Labour overhauls Whitehall. And obviously, you shouldn't take this one at face value, because normally when a political party overhauls the civil service, they're basically setting it up so it works better for them than their opponents, which has already happened, and why the Labour government's able to do things where others couldn't. But I think it's interesting that they're taking a harsh public line with them, basically saying, lump it or leave it, you're working for us now. So come back to the office, because that was a big dispute, is we want you back in the office actually doing work rather than sitting at home doing nothing. Like they had cases where people were doing their gardening and stuff on work hours.
Yeah.
Which is a bit frustrating for someone paid by taxpayer money. But yes, I think this is one of those things that is probably a bit more bipartisan, but obviously the right in British politics is very harsh on the civil service, and it appears as if it's a bit more right-wing, even if it's probably done just for the sake of, we've got lots of left-wing things we want to do, and we need you here to do it. So I think there's a more practical reason, and it's not necessarily ideological. But one thing I did enjoy was recently there was some research that came out that said over 60 Reform UK candidates in local elections are Tory defectors, and Labour picked up on this and started running with ads that sound like they were made by us. Like, Reform candidates are just Tories in disguise, don't let a Tory sneak through. And Nigel Farage's head with an inside it's Cammy Badnock. Which, to be fair, is a legitimate criticism of them. They are too close.
Yeah, but just not. It's just the classic spin, isn't it? That's right. They're too close. The Reform are Tory 2.0, but it's not that Kim is secretly pulling Nigel's strings.
No, of course.
It's not that though, is it?
And it's also not that Labour isn't any. It's not like Labour's distinct from those either. They're all the same.
Yeah.
Problem, really, aren't they? And then there was more of this, and I think I saw Nigel Farage complaining that the Labour Party had released 40 pieces of propaganda, basically insulting Reform, and you can see that they've basically taken their line on illegal migration, because Starmer's saying he's going to do things to stop the boats. They started addressing the two-tier justice, so now Reform doesn't actually have any unique talking points of their own, where they're the only party that's addressing the issues, because those are the two that they had, and now they're gone, they're off the table, because Starmer and eventually the Tories will have those as well, and it will become just a run-of-the-mill political issue, and that's how it gets contained, that's how it doesn't get solved, and of course Reform have their part to play in that as well. But my point being here is that by merit of their electoral ambitions, the Labour Party has seemingly turned to become the most right-wing party in Britain, but don't be fooled by it, because obviously we all know that they're not actually right-wing, they don't actually believe these things, they're doing it for pragmatic reasons, they're doing it for their image, they're doing it to win elections, but I thought it'd be a good way to shame a lot of the people that are involved in the Conservative and Reform parties, because if Labour can outflank you to the right, then you're doing something wrong.
Remember the Tories, the Labour and the Fabian Society, that connection there. The Fabian Society.
Of course, yeah.
And being wolves in sheep's clothing. Completely shameless. Just lie about anything. Lie about
They'll do anything to maintain power, wouldn't they? If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.